Welcome to the Resume Writing Academy open call, our Writing Mastery open calls. We hold about 2 of these a year so that we can give you the information you need to write resumes that help your clients achieve their career goals. Today we're going to be talking about how resumes are vetted, specifically with bias in resumes, and how can we diminish the impact of implicit bias. And we're just thrilled to have Cheryl Minnick with us today. Cheryl is an expert in this topic and has become one by doing a ton of research on what this looks like, and also doing interactive sessions with career service providers like you who are out there doing this work as she is, as I am. And how do we help clients overcome this bias? So we're going to be sharing some of her research today, and also looking for you to share your insights. What are you doing with clients so that we can gather and really all have the best tools in our toolbox to help clients overcome these challenges. If you haven't been on one of our sessions before, I'm Marie, CEO of Resume Writing Academy and Career Thought Leaders. And we keep doing these events to help you with your tools. So we look forward to hearing also what you need to do your work. And I'm going to have a short survey that I'll send out to you afterwards to see what kinds of topics you're interested in. As I was saying before we started the recording, you can use the Q&A or the chat to share. And you can choose whether you share that chat with everyone or just with Cheryl and I. What do we do here at Resume Writing Academy? We have e-summits, and these are 2-hour really in-depth sessions where we give you strategies for specific career challenges. The one we have coming up this month on February 20th is for sales, business development, and marketing resumes. How do you help those people stand out when maybe they say, you know, they've achieved quota, so has every other salesperson? How can we help them differentiate themselves? You get 15 to 20 sample resumes with every one of those e-summits, and we have a whole library of those on our website, covering topics from ATS, which Cheryl and I did a few years ago, graduating students, international resumes, to sales, marketing that we're doing coming up, technology, all different types of career challenges in there. We also have our ACRW training coming up on February 27th, and this is an opportunity for you to transform through writing and getting feedback on your resumes. This isn't theoretical, or I'm going to tell you what to do and then hope that you're doing it. You're actually going to get feedback on 5 resume writing projects so that you can grow during those projects and really come out a different writer, pretty much no matter how you come in. You have experienced writers and new writers that come in and get transformed because they're getting feedback on their work from other experienced writers. Our ACPW profile writing is very similar. You write profiles. It's not theory, it's actually you writing profiles and getting feedback so that you can start writing modern profiles that get away from just a copy and paste of the resume. And we're going to help you do that and grow your skills in profile writing. Lastly, our newest program that we launched last year is the Academy Certified Storyteller, Career Storyteller, and that is how do you get to that next level of really having documents that tell a story that engage the reader. Deb Dibb and Louise Kurzmart teach that with me. We're going to be having another session launch right after the Career Thought Leaders Conference. We'll actually be kind of starting that session live with a post-conference workshop at the conference, and then the program will start after that for those who are interested in continuing. You write, you write stories for clients, and their final project in that program is to write a storied portfolio for your clients. So if you're interested in any of those, let me know. But that's an overview of what we do here at the Resume Writing Academy. And I know we have tons of graduates of those programs here on this call, so thank you all for joining us. And Cheryl, you are just such a wealth of information, and I can't tell you how lucky I am that we bumped into each other at a conference 12 years ago now, which is hard to believe. 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
Babies.
Oh, we were babies. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Know. In the beautiful city of San Diego. And you just dedicate yourself to doing the work and doing the research to know what's going on in these topics. So thank you for sharing it. Thank you for teaching.
I'm really excited to share a little bit today about implicit bias and how resumes are vetted and written. It's really important work to read or understand or share with one another, because we are without implicitly and unconsciously actually embedding bias in the resumes we're writing, and we don't even know it. So let's talk about what implicit bias is first. What it is it's the unconscious attribution of qualities to a particular social class. It's our attitude, our thoughts, and our feelings about a person or a group of people that spontaneously pass through our minds, and we don't really even know we're doing it. Anthropologically, it's called our danger detector. This is really real, and it matters for us and our clients. It's super important to talk about this because if we learn to identify where it exists and how it affects our decision making when we're looking at, reviewing, or writing resumes, we can be mindful of those risks and help avoid it and help others avoid it, help search committees, help our friends avoid it. It's super important. The way I got interested was I actually saw a study on implicit bias in resume vetting probably, I don't know, 7 years ago. So I started following all of the research, and there's quite a bit of research on the topic. In every slide, I will have the name of the research article, the journal, and the citation if you want to go and grab it and read it yourself. They're super interesting. I suggest if you have some bedtime reading or insomnia, grab one or two of them. They're great.
And we will also send out the slides and a list of those so that people have it and they can go and dig those out. So don't worry about trying to write it down really fast. We'll send it all out to you.
Great. So let's go to one of the first studies about how recruiters vet candidates. That study started with the only thing researchers knew for sure. The only thing they knew for sure was that resumes are used to make the first hiring cut decision. But they wanted to know, how were resumes used? How were they vetted? And what exactly was in the resume that gave the information needed to get a yes, to go in the yes pile? So the researchers started with the assumption that recruiters were looking to hire for organizational excellence and that they wanted to build a diverse, equitable, inclusive workforce. Okay, so that's what they started with. And then we're going to start with that. So let's look at the research in 2012, the Ladders did. They started out looking to discover how the eye reads a resume and then affects our decision making. And again, they started with the only thing they knew for sure. The resume is the first screening tool. So this was the first formal quantitative research on resume vetting, and the groundbreaking research showed that our eye is actually biased and our eye actually does discriminate against content. The results were, as we say, eye-opening. Can we go to the next slide, Marie? There we go. The Ladders researchers use this assessment software that tracks eye movement. This software analyzes how the human visual system moves, how the eye interacts with the system. It measures gaze points, like where you actually gaze, and then it measures your eye motion. They took that software and put it on recruiters. It's like attached to your glasses. And they put it on recruiters and asked them to vet and read resumes and online profiles. Tom, you might be really interested in this to look at the online profile section of this research. The researchers captured the content that the eye actually enjoyed and really read, the content the eye completely, totally overlooked, how much time was spent reading each section, and how fast eyes move from section to section. And again, results were eye-opening. They took 6.25 seconds to look at a resume. That study was replicated again by Be Hiring the next year, and they found 5 to 7 seconds. But they also found that we are reading in an F shape, the same shape that marketers know that we read. So we're using that same reading format of our eyes on the resume. So you can see from the slide, the things that the recruiters were really reading were 20% of the time they were looking for keywords, and 80% of the time they looked for 6 things. Those 6 things were name, previous and current title, previous and current start and end dates, and then your education. That's what they were looking at. So the modern format on the right scored a 60% higher scannability rate and more time for the eye to read than the old-fashioned style on the left. So you can increase rank improvement 60% by just moving to a more modern style and making certain that you put the keywords in the F shape. If you look at the resume, both of these resumes, the heat-seeking map over the top of it, you can somewhat see an F shape. The red on the very top, that is a section where people actually read it, focus spots. It had a 3-second read. The blue is a grazing mark where we grazed over it, and the yellow was our visual path. We want more red than anything else. So if you look at the F shape, it's very interesting here. I think it's quite interesting to see that no recruiter looked at the bottom of the old school resume, except there's a red spot on the right-hand side. Do you see that red spot in the old-fashioned way? There's no words there. So all I can think is that perhaps a female recruiter was holding the resume and looked down at her fake nail and thought, oh, I should polish my nail, or I need a fill, because I don't understand why there was red reading where there's no words. So what we've learned from this on this heat-seeking map is that we really do need to top load and left load the resume. Yet someone said maybe they got really bored reading it. Perhaps. So let's go. So that's the first study. Let's go to the second study about name bias in recruiting. So I've looked at many of the research studies on name bias. The one Emily and Greg are more employable. That's a very interesting study to read. And during recruitment, a candidate's resume will hold a lot of insight into their attribute, skills, and job viability, but implicitly name is being considered. American history is riddled with examples of immigrants who changed their names to hide a heritage that might have subjected them to discrimination. We still actually see that happening. I'm sure some of you have had clients who've asked you if I should change my name or not because I might be biased against. The issue in the United Kingdom was pretty strong, and then in a speech in 2015, at the time Prime Minister Cameron referred to this study, and they have said that in 2020 they'll be doing name-blind recruitment for different roles. We actually at the university in 2014 started name-blind recruitment, and I've been on 2 name-blind recruitment committees. It's quite interesting to see what that does to the committee. They spend about 10 minutes trying to figure out if it's a female or a male. It's been very interesting to sit back and listen to. Anyways, in this study about Emily and Greg, 5,000 resumes were sent to 1,300 employment ads in sales, administration, clerical, and customer service. Job applicants with white names, Emily and Greg, sent 10 resumes and got 1 interview, but applicants with African-American sounding names, Lakeisha and Jamel, had to send 15 resumes to get 1 interview. These are the same exact identical resume, just the name was changed. The study showed that non-white sounding names face bias regardless of the EEO laws or anti-discrimination legislation. Another study was conducted in 2017 called Implicit Age Cues in Resumes in Frontiers of Psychology, and they found with the same exact resume, different names. They used older sounding names and older sounding community activities like Elks and Shriners, and that led to less hireability. So what do we know from that? As a writer, it might not behoove us to put on an older sounding community activity. It's something for us to think about. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm said think carefully about that. We all suffer when someone is biased against and prejudiced on their name. And as writers, we can start to help that by trying to eliminate it. How do you do that? That's something Marie and I would like to know. And if you'd like to send your ideas of how you yourself help reduce bias at the end of this, we'll do that and we'll gather it all together in a document.
And we do have people sharing in the chat. So yes, continue to
Oh,
share
can
in
you
the
do that?
chat.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I'll collect the chat as well and send that along, and then we'll use it to compile everything together.
Super excited. We'll talk about a few ideas at the end, but certainly we're looking to the group, to the team, to our community, and sharing all your ideas and putting it in one place. Let's look at gender bias in recruitment. Oh my goodness, this was bad. So the research that seemed to be the most interesting to me was Simon versus Susan, 2014. Of course, there's many, many more studies, but Simon versus Susan, there was a little bit more than 1,000 HR managers were given a resume to review. Half got Simon's, half got Susan's, exactly the same resume, nothing different for the exact same job. Simon got the interview 62% more likely. Even though they matched Susan's attributes of 14 to 20 to job attributes and Simon's 6 to 20, Simon still got asked to interview at a higher rate. Both chose Simon, male and female recruiters. Then the National Academy of Sciences, that second one, that study was a double-blind study in 2012, and it looked at university science hiring. They were looking for a lab manager position, and the men were offered a higher starting salary and were offered the position more often when the researchers used the same identical resume for both. There were half male and half female names given to 127 faculty, half male and half female. All reviewers downgraded the female resume for competence, hireability, salary, and mentoring compared to the identical male. I've continued on my research on that line because that frankly ticked me off. And I found that there's been a lot of biased gender writing that we put into a resume that is read in a different way. So I've been using Gender Decoder, which is a free software, to look and see if I am engendering my resumes. And as much as I know, I actually was. So we'll talk about that maybe in a different webinar. The next study, there was one by Zippia in 2016. It showed that hiring managers favored what they call a male style of writing. When they explored what do you mean by a male style of writing, what they found is women use more words, 42 more words in a resume than a man will. And so what we've taken from that is we need to write tight, write as tightly as possible. The other thing they found was men were more likely to use a bulleted list and women paragraphs. The bulleted list was more fondly read than a paragraph. Well, duh, we all hate reading paragraphs. So what we learned from that study is write tight and try not to use large paragraphs, use bulleted lists. Another thing they found was that 33% of the women were including what they called a non-traditional resume section, which is about personal attributes. And that was frowned upon in this study. So again, we want to write quote unquote, a masculine style, tight and fewer words than what women usually use. If we go down to the next study, the Journal of Applied Psychology in 2014 found that faculty members respond to white males in a stronger way. They sent the same letter to faculty looking for lab managers, the same letter from Brad Anderson, Keisha Thomas, Rajay Singh, Ming Cheng, and Juanita Martinez, asking for a 10-minute informational interview to join a lab. Who do you think got the most responses? The same exact letter. If any of you said Brad Anderson, you were right. So there you go right there on name bias. What to do about it, I don't know. But the first thing is to acknowledge it and explore it, which we as a community of writers are doing right now and sharing what we can do about that.
Cheryl, what was the name of the software that you mentioned?
Oh, Gender Decoder is one of them.
Gender decoder. So
Gender
is it like
decoder. Mhm.
genderdecoder.com?
Yeah, I'll send the list of the gender software you can run your resumes and your writing through. There's another one. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now.
Okay, yeah, it looks like
It will
there's a
come
whole
to me
bunch
in
that
this. It will come
Recruitment.
to me in the middle of my talking. There was one more study, and it was 1999, the impact of gender on review of curriculum vitaes. There were about equal, almost 120 male and female CVs assigned a male or a female name. Both male and female reviewers gave the male applicants stronger evaluation for teaching, research, and service, and were more likely to hire the male. I continued my research into that study, and I can tell you that we are using the wrong language to support and promote women. We're using engendered language, which is not interpreted as strong as non-gendered language. That's a complete different 1-hour webinar, but we can do that later. Let's look at recommendation letters. This was super interesting too. The research on this, the first piece was by North Carolina Chapel Hill, and they used a software called Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count. They did computer text analysis of almost 5,000 recommendation letters, 60% female, 40% male, written by about 4,000 high school teachers, and they found a significant difference by gender in length and language. The female teachers wrote longer letters than male teachers. There you go. That research is confirming the earlier research that women talk too much. And women were writing longer letters for male students than for female students. The adjectives that they were using to describe male and female applicants were gender stereotyped and based in social role theory. So male students were successful, accomplished, had ability, and women were nurturing and compassionate and hardworking. So we want to make sure that we change our language. And again, we can talk about that at a longer time. This is just about vetting resumes. There was another study in 2003. They looked at 300 recommendation letters from medical school dated 1990. And then they found that the recommendation letters for female applicants were shorter, and they provided minimal assurance rather than solid recommendation. They raised doubts and portrayed women as a student and a teacher, but men as researchers and professionals. A very interesting study by Trix and Pensa, and it shows that if we can even degender or ungender, I don't even know the word, we can push women forward. It again, yes, it makes me puke too. That women in 1990 were precluded from medical school based on these letters of recommendation that were so engendered and so soft. But we can reduce that just by coming together as a team, by looking at these research studies, and by talking about it. Every research study showed that if we talk about it and we acknowledge it, we can actually decrease it. So it's very important that we talk about it in order to decrease it. Let's look at gender bias in job postings. So there's been gendered wording in job ads, and women are less likely to apply for a job that use masculine sounding words. Women typically don't apply for positions that have words like leader, competitive, and dominant, but we're drawn towards, let's say, support, understand, and interpersonal. That was 2011 research. It's up on the slide. You can read that if you'd like. There was another study done in 2014 that found that men are assumed competent as they walk in the door. Women must prove competence in the workplace. That study coined the words, if you've heard the word man-interruption, where a woman is speaking and a man interrupts, that's called man-interruption. And bro-creating is when a male team member will usurp a woman's idea. I actually on campus hear the young girls in some of the committee work and the students, they'll turn and go, oh my God, bro-creating again makes me sick. So it's a word that the millennials and the younger generation is using right now. I heard a new word on campus the other day. I walked into a kind of a pre-search committee where people were talking about applying for a particular ASUM position, a student government position. And the panel was all young men. And one of the young girls I sat next to, she said, "Oh my gosh, a manel, go figure." So a manel is a panel of just men. And I turned to her and I said, "Oh, good, maybe they can mansplain to us all." So mansplain is another word of a man explaining to a woman something silly. But these are words that are out there in our world. So self-awareness is our first defense, the first defense. I totally, the research also found that women will apply for a job if they meet 100% of the qualifications, and men if they meet 60%. I'm sorry, someone just said, why am I saying young women? Because I'm old and they are younger students at age 18 to 20 that were sitting with me. I'll try not to do that in the future. Height bias. This is fascinating to me. In 2019, only 4.2% of CEOs were female. So I'm diverging for resume reviews for a second. So if only 4.2% of CEOs were female, that was interesting. So I started looking into that. The average American man is 5'9", yet 60% of American CEOs are over 6 feet tall, with the average of 6.6, 6 foot 2 inches tall. Yet only 14% of American men are over 6 foot tall. So that's interesting. So to be a CEO, you need to be tall? I don't know. But then I started looking at presidents, and I actually just looked at the height of our presidents. And the last 8 presidents, the shortest president was Jimmy Carter at 5'10". Trump is 6'2", Obama 6'1", Bush Jr. 6 foot, Clinton 6'2", Bush Sr. 6'2", Reagan 6'1", and Ford 6 foot. So is there a height correlation? That's so interesting. Studies do show that height and salary are positively correlated, and that men earn 2.5% more inch of height. So I guess we tell people who are a little bit height challenged, wear tall shoes. Yes, I've actually wondered about Mayor Pete. As I see him on the stage, I would be advising him to probably wear taller shoes. I don't know. Okay, let's go back to the resumes. Age bias in recruitment. So age bias, there are 5 generations in work right now: Gen Z, Y, X, baby boomers, and those north of 60 who are working into their 70s. So these are challenging times for people who are a little bit older, especially women. We are facing a twofer, they call it. The Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco did a study and found that there is discrimination against older workers, and it is precluding them from remaining or getting into the workforce. This research submitted 40,000 fictitious resumes for 13,000 jobs in 12 cities, and all of the applicants had the same amount of experience, so it was all controlled resumes. They found that the female applicants in their mid-60s were less likely than the same aged man to be called in for an interview. So again, same resume, you could tell someone's age was roughly 60, but the men were called in at a greater rate than women. So this study said it's a twofer, age and gender. Another study in 2017, Age Bias, the role of facial appearance, found that older facial appearance evokes unfavorable impressions about fitness. So again, Tom, in the note, NCOPE accreditation, some of the stuff you said was absolutely right, backed up by research. The picture really matters on LinkedIn. It really does matter. So you might want to try sending your headshot through Photo Feeler. I don't know if anyone knows about that free software. Photo Feeler, one word. It's a data science photo testing site. And you can have your headshot analyzed for competence, likability, and influence. It's free. You put up your headshot and they send you 3 headshots to review. You review 3 headshots and then your headshot will be reviewed. I found out that from my headshot, I'm really highly likable but completely incompetent. So I need a new headshot, and I am in Montana. We don't really have much, so that's what my children will be doing for me for Valentine's Day, with their cell phones, I guess, for now. But Photo Feeler is free, it's great, and it's fun to try that. So we want to make sure that we're trying to euthanize a resume a bit. I know you all have great ideas. One is to go away from YouTube and AOL and use Gmail, to use one phone number, not home and cell, just use one number, to euthanize the resume. Would love to know what you do to euthanize the resume. So we'd love to hear that from you. And let's look at religious bias in resumes and recruitment. There was a study done in 2014. The researchers sent, can we go to the next slide? The researchers sent 3,200 identical resumes, fictitious of course, of brand new graduates from Southern universities to Southern employers that all included one religious identifier. So this research group used 7 different faith-based student organizations. So the resumes were all the same, and it just included student, faith-based organization, and then the name, instead of faith-based, it said the name of the faith. Here are the faiths: atheist, pagan, Catholic, evangelical, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and Willenolian. Willenolian is fake. It's not even a religion. They made it up. The resumes that express religious orientation received 29% fewer responses. What do you suppose the highest discrimination level toward resumes was? Go ahead and type in the chat box. What do you think of atheist, pagan, Catholic, evangelical, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or Willenolian? Okay. Oh, we got a lot. Okay, here we go. Here is the answer. The highest discrimination level toward resumes was Muslim, pagan, and atheist. Okay, here's which is the one that had no discernible difference against? What religion do you suppose leapt forward? Oh, a lot of you are on. It was the Jewish faith. So, advice to resume writers. Now that we have reviewed this research as a group, as a panel, as a family collaborative of resume writers and career counselors and career coaches, what are we going to do? How will we do this? How do we wordsmith a resume to include or exclude religious affiliation? What do we do? Send your ideas. And if you want, go ahead, read that study. There are other studies also, but I've given you the study, the citation, and the year. Grab the study, download it, and read it yourself. They're fascinating. Let's read to subtle class clue bias in recruitment. This was also very interesting. In 2016, Northwest University's Kellogg School of Management conducted a study on class advantage. They wanted to see if resumes that signaled class advantage had a greater entry into law school. They did. Resumes of quote unquote higher class men scored 4 times more interview rates, 4 times more at elite law firms. So what was higher class? What did they indicate or say that made them think that? 3 things. It's gonna make you sick. Are you ready? Sailing, polo, and classical music. Those were activities that all scored higher. When they took the same resume of a man, a higher class man, and switched those three things with country music and track, the scores automatically decreased. So they redid the study with female names on those same resumes of quote unquote higher class women trying to get into an elite law firm. The women faced a negative stereotype, and they were considered less committed to an intensive career, even though they sailed, played polo, and liked classical music. So this was where women had a penalty imposed on them on higher class women. So I've given you the research, I've given you the citation, I've given you the month and the year. Download the research, read it yourself, and let's all get together and figure out how we can work together to neutralize some of this bias. Let's look at the mom penalty in recruitment. This is one that we can do very easily. And Tom, you're absolutely right. One way we can fight against this is to make sure that we have enough keywords in resumes to make sure that they go through the systems fast enough and strong enough. So let's look at the mom penalty. This hurt my feelings because I am a mom, and I wonder sometimes if maybe I didn't get a job because I was a mom, and I don't know. But we do have traditional notions of fathers as breadwinners, mothers as caregivers. It's deeply ingrained in our culture. Do moms fare worse in hiring decisions than childless men? Yeah. Do women encounter a motherhood wage penalty? Yeah, they do. Are women stereotyped as less committed if they have children? Unfortunately, yes. Working mothers do encounter stereotypes and systematic disadvantages in pay, benefits, and perceived competence when compared to childless women and men. Let's look at this study, Gender and Society, from September 2010. The research asked participants to evaluate resumes for a marketing role, a senior marketing role, with a salary of $135,000 to $80,000. They were to put the resume in a yes or no pile and put a note, a starting salary they thought would be good for this person. The application materials were exactly the same. They were manipulated for gender by name. So the gender was manipulated with a female and male name, and community involvement. That was the only two things that were different on these resumes. For a female name, they put that she was in the PTA as an officer. For the male, that he was a neighborhood association officer. Okay, family neighborhood association officer. The screening notes given to the recruiters were exactly the same, exactly. All applicants had a spouse. All applicants were in a heterosexual marriage, and all applicants had children. So again, that's what they were reading on. The mothers were rated as interpersonally deficient, less likable, less warm, less committed, compared to an identical resume that was a father's resume. The father was rated as likable, had better interpersonal skills. Again, identical resumes manipulated for name and parenthood. The mothers were held to higher standards than non-mothers and fathers and penalized by salary. The mothers were offered $7,000 less than the fathers were. The fathers were on average actually offered $6,000 on average more than the top salary that the recruiters were supposed to give. So what does that mean to us? We know that the parenthood indicator on a woman's resume will result in a negative impression, but on a father's resume, it did the opposite. I hate that study. I will continue to look at other studies, but I'm sharing with you right now what the studies show. So again, we're a family of career coaches, resume writers. What can we do as a family together? Send your ideas to Marie, and we'll have a document that we can share with everyone so we can all learn from one another what we can do to diminish, if not completely expunge, implicit bias. Let's look at the unemployed. Oh boy, is there bias in unemployment? Yes, there is. If you have a client who is not hearing back from job applications and they're what we call the long-term unemployed, that's 6 months or more, what can we do to change that? So in 2012, a research study found that companies rank recently unemployed qualified candidates higher than those who've been unemployed for 6 months or more. The study found that long-term unemployed, that means 6 months or more, they were at a severe disadvantage, that candidates without any relevant experience at all would be selected over someone who was unemployed for more than 6 months. So you might be working with a client and they have that battle fatigue. They've been out of work more than 6 months a year and they're facing battle fatigue. They are. What do you do to help them? I know there's a lot of tricks out there. Share your trick and we'll include that in our follow-up document to you. So recently unemployed, 6 months or less, they fared okay. 6 months or more, not so good, not so good. Let's look at resume whitening. Resume whitening, oh my. 36% of minorities state they scrub their resumes. This is a fascinating study. If you want to read the study, it's on March 2016. I highly suggest it. Really good reading at night. Lots of big words, it'll put you to sleep, but excellent reading. So University of Toronto did a 2-year study on marginalization of minority applicants. They sent 1,600 resumes out for the same job, same resumes. 25% of an interview rate was brought if the resume was whitened, a 25% greater interview rate. Only 10% if the race was evident. 25% of Black candidates and 21% of Asian candidates received callbacks when their resumes were whitened, even though the qualifications listed were identical to white candidates. So this study found that 36% of the minority applicants were scrubbing their resumes to conceal race or removing any race-revealing language or content. One applicant even wrote, shoot, I even add white stuff like kayaking and hiking, you know. Some minority job seekers reject scrubbing. They won't. And they'll say, I whiten, but I don't scrub. I just lightly whiten my resume. I might alter my first name. I might use a middle initial. I might use my American sounding nickname. I'll remove any experience or achievement that has something related to my cultural or racial group. The remaining 2/3 of the people interviewed said, oh, I don't whiten and I don't scrub, but all my friends do. And then when the friends were interviewed, they said the same thing. They didn't, but everyone else does. Another study found that when applying to a pro-diversity company, minorities were only half as likely to whiten their resume, but the result was the same. It was a similar discrimination rate. Interviews were just as low for unwhitened resumes for pro-diversity jobs. The study did find that whitened resumes were 2 times more likely to get an interview. So what do we say to our client who's a minority? Do we say, you're going to be more vulnerable if you're transparent? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I am just sharing the research I did because I was so consumed with care and concern that I started looking into the research and putting it together. I don't have an answer, but I know together we all will have answers together. So the takeaway is to think about the implicit bias. It is in name, age, race, socioeconomic status, parenthood, unemployment, and gender. And that does impact hiring decisions, but we can neutralize that in some way by just recognizing it exists and talking about it and talking about amongst ourselves and trying to help our clients and help one another figure out ways to do this. It's very painful to me. Our campus has the highest Native American student population of any school, and it pains me. So what some of the things that we can do that some of you have done or said is we can omit a street address, a mailing address. Younger candidates don't often put in a street address, so perhaps that's one way. It is really rare for a younger applicant to put in a home number and then have a cell number. They tend to have just one number, not a landline. Younger applicants don't use guide words like the word email and cell. We know that's a cell because it's the one number. We know it's an email. And the Greg's Reference Manual 1311, Section B1 says that guide words are so familiar that they're no longer used in writing. Do we still use 20 years experience, or should we say seasoned professional? What do we do there? Do we say comprehensive experience, significant experience, 40 years experience? I don't know. If you have ideas, share those. Do we omit the college graduation date? Well, we can on a resume, but then what happens when we get in the applicant tracking system and it won't let us move forward until we put the date? What do we do? References available upon request, that's super old. Younger candidates don't do that. To whom it may concern just shows that you don't know technology. Try to find someone's name. Maybe we join a youthful organization. I don't know. Maybe we start hiking. We don't say we're in the Elks or the Shriners. I don't know. Definitely omit high school completely. What do we do on LinkedIn? Do we mask some of the older activities? It's not an obituary, that's for sure. So do we stay within 15 to 20 years to avoid bias? That's a thought. Do we add recreational activities and athletic activities? We know that we want to make sure that we're using the F pattern. We're front loading, left loading, and top loading information. That we have a keyword section, like Tom said, make sure that we have a lot of keywords in the resume that are going to get a higher score rate. Perhaps we include all the technology, modern technology that we can use. Maybe we can use InDesign and WordPress, and maybe we're Excel wizards. Perhaps that would be us, for us to do. Definitely a modern style, absolutely, with line separators. We know that we want to write in a male-dominated way, which is tight, so we need to edit ruthlessly. What else do? We encourage women with 60% of the qualifications to apply anyways. Go for it, go for it. Do we add parenting? Do we say, well, you've been out of work for 2 years, but you worked on the PTA. Let's add in that you were a PTA president. Do we do that? I don't know. We know that we can look at photographs, and we can use Photo Feeler to have a more engaging, youthful photograph. Maybe we include new updated certificates, industry certificates. That might work. Do we scrub resumes? Do we whiten them? What do we do? Do we omit or do we wordsmith religious affiliation? Do we omit it completely? If applying to law school, I know what we do. We all take up sailing, polo, and classical music, that's for sure. If we're guys, we do that. But we would love all of your ideas to put it in one document so we can help one another. I know each of you have great ideas. The rabbi just said it's better to know the truth of this so we can move through it. Yes, the truth of it, if we know the truth of it. When we're writing bullets, we want to make sure that we focus on car, star, whatever you use, but what is the result of what they did? We don't want just answered phones. What was the result? Why? What were the sales number? And then we want to make sure we tailor our resume to our audience. But what did it say? If our audience says we're a diversified workforce and we're looking for diversity, those studies showed that no, you really aren't. You're biased against. So it's very interesting. Other things we can do, let's go, is we can look at our own bias. There is a free test you can take. It's called Project Implicit. It's by, you can take the Implicit Association Test. It's called the IAT. It's free. You can check on your own bias. You can run your resume or your cover letters through Gender Decoder. I just did this. I wrote a letter of recommendation for a young man, and I know what I'm doing, and I was very purposely strong. I ran it through Gender Decoder, and I got not so good. And it told me some words that I should take out and consider other words, and it showed me other words to consider. So it was very helpful to me. I had to write a letter of recommendation probably 3 days later, and I got a higher score. So I'm doing better and better. Yes, the name of the test is Implicit Association Test, the IAT from Harvard. And Gender Decoder is the name of that software. Another thing we can do is when we are on a hiring team or thinking about a hiring team, we can diversify it. Make sure the hiring team has women, men, parents, minorities, someone from the LGBTQ community, and those of differing ages. We can blind hiring by name. That often helps. And then there's another software. It's called Textio, Textio, Textio software. You can throw in a job posting and you can look and see if it's written in a female or a male style. It will tell you the words and it will tell you the tone and it will suggest substitution words. So you could do that with the job posting your client is applying for and see if it's written toward a male audience, a female audience, or what the words are. Shoot, dump your own resume work in there. And make sure that you're not propagating inequality by inadvertently writing in a biased way. I encourage us all to share what we use. It's Textio, Textio, not CIO, Textio. We are recording this, and we will have the summary document of everyone's ideas put together to share with you as everyone works together to identify bias and call it out and help one another from propagating implicit bias in resume writing and our cover letter writing. I was super excited to share this all with you. I'm a bit of a research nerd. I love learning. I'm curious, very, very curious. So when someone says to me, you know, you shouldn't put the religious affiliation on there, I always want to say, why? Who said so? I want to read more research on that. So that's where it all started. And I was very, very happy to share with you. And I hope there's other research nerds on the call.
Yeah, and we've had such great ideas in the chat, so we will share all of those. And of course, to always gather many research, which, you know, Cheryl had many different citations for each of the points that she shared. So we will share those citations with you. This full webinar will go up on our YouTube page. So if you haven't been to our YouTube page, we also have 2 specific videos talking about this topic. One that's on YouTube about coaching clients through bias, and another one that's actually on Facebook, our last Facebook Live, which went through resume samples specifically around age discrimination. So if you haven't been to the Career Thought Leaders, so the Career Thought Leaders Facebook page, click on the videos tab, and you'll see that we have all of the videos there. We don't have very many yet, but our last one was on age discrimination in resumes, and we went through resume samples specifically.
Again, I want to make sure that everyone knows that the terminology that I used is out of every research study. It's not my terminology. So whitening, those words are actually in the research study. Cheryl would probably not say those words.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, the people that research this, right, they're just trying to do the best that they can. We
Yeah.
gather as many research studies as we can so that we see what are the trends, what are we seeing. And some people had some other topics suggested that we build on, so we will do that. And I'm sure Cheryl will love your suggestions.
Oh,
So
I can't wait to hear everyone's suggestions. I can't wait.
yes. And your suggestions for how we do this in resumes or maybe how we don't. I think the main suggestion is this is not us giving advice to a client on these topics that they
No,
should whiten their resume, that they should remove
no,
dates. This is educating them on the issues, on the issues, on the data, and then helping them decide what they want to do. We want to validate them, help them build their confidence, and us advising anything aligned with their identity can impact that. So we're not advising, we're not shooting all over them, right? We are
no,
saying
I'm not
the
shitting
data and what do
anything.
you
I'm simply just only sharing the research that I've done. That's it. And I forgot to tell you the names of those. I promised the names of the gender bias calculators that you can use. One is called tomforth.com. I'll email them to
yeah, email would
Cheryl
probably
and you
be
can put
good.
it out.
Yeah.
So it's I'll spell it. It's tomforth, tomforth.co.uk/gender bias. It's a gender bias calculator. You can see if you're gendered in your writing of a resume or cover letter. And the other one is by Slowe, SLOWE. Both of those can help you review your own writing for your own gender bias.
And just
That's
two other points.
fascinating.
Yeah, two other points here that I see people making. One is that the rebel in Ruth Wyndon, I love it. The rebel in me doesn't want to comply with this. And that may be a choice that our client wants to make. You know, I want to be proud of my identity, and that's
Absolutely.
a great choice. However, we don't want them to make that choice uninformed and be upset that then they're not getting callbacks because they were really out and proud, if you will, about something that maybe is not aligned with the organizations that they're applying to. And of course, changing their resume isn't the only strategy. They can change where they apply, they can change their approach. There's a lot of other things they can do as long as we're chatting with them about this conversation. And then other people have said, oh, you know, doesn't just good branding overcome this? And the research around implicit bias would say no, because those biases kick in as soon as we see something and we aren't even reading it. We aren't able to let you sell that person to us with all of their great achievements if we haven't done something to cover up the bias. And there's some strategies that may be small, you know, not using long paragraphs. That's just good design. And it also, you know, makes a resume more male, which is interesting. And then there's some strategies that may be more, you know, identity compelling or identity changing. And those we may decide not to make. So there's a range of strategies. There's a range of bias. However, I don't agree with the idea that if we just brand them really well, we're going to overcome it. That's not how the brain and neuroscience works with these implicit bias. So go read the research, as Cheryl shared. This Harvard site about implicit bias is fascinating. There's several other research sites on implicit bias and things that recruiters are doing about it too, so that you can help clients understand recruiters are trying as well. And so we can match them and meet them where they're at with trying to share things in a way that won't trigger that bias.
I'll share another study. It's the Commission on the Status of Women. They have a wonderful PDF flyer about how to avoid gender bias in reference letter writing, but I would assume it would bleed over to resumes and cover letters, what adjectives to avoid and what adjectives to include to have a stronger reaction of the reader. So I will send that along with
yes, and that's one of the other good
you.
Modern writing techniques is to avoid adjectives, because adjectives tend to kind of evoke concern in lots of different ways. Recruiters don't like a bunch of adjectives anyways, and I've met with a lot of clients of other resume writers who are frustrated because adjectives were used that didn't feel describe them. So write tight, write short, less adjectives, and you can avoid some of these things while writing a modern resume. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Cheryl. It was really great.
Thank you. It was really fun. And thank you everyone for your ideas. Let's work together to reduce bias in resumes and advance our clients. I know you all have great ideas and I cannot wait to hear them all.
Yes, and the chat is going to be like 10 pages long. So thank you all for sharing that information as well.
That means we got great ideas.
Yes. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.